for you. And thanks for your attention. I think it's a lovely thing when people actually listen to poems. And it's so rare, you know? Yeah, alright, so I'll do this one, and then I'll do one from the book. And then I get to hang out with you while we hear all these brilliant writers. Alright, this is called Impermanence. Sometimes I wonder what happens to people's hands when they disappear in their pockets. Of course, my rational brain knows they go on being hands, but still there is the question. I wonder if object permanence isn't the biggest trick of them all, a scam, a way to ground the brain in its thin bath of liquid. Don't worry, when you close your eyes, the world goes on being the world. That dark clearing, cleaving open in your skull, don't worry. Existence is a technology like anything else. It can be broken down and written in an easier alphabet. Then the thin membrane peels back and all your nerve endings start speaking at once. When I came out to my mother, it was over a text. Each letter wept into place. She erased the message. Then it never existed. My belief in objects disappearing. Every day the newspaper reads me death. Every day bullets make their grand entrances and exits. Every day another friend takes his narrative in his own hands and answers an old question. And I'm left cursing paper, pulp emissary of loss, messenger carved from the heart of a tree, each letter the bearer of bad tidings. Of course, my rational brain knows he is dead, and he will always be dead, but still, there is the question. Language being a technology like anything else, I have to wonder what happens if instead I read backwards. If it begins with a flag at half-mast making the noise a flag makes. If it continues with his casket rising out of the ground. If it ends how all stories end. An infant climbing into his mother. Animals throwing themselves back in the ocean. Cool. And from the last poem, this is an ode. Make some noise if you got a butthole. Y'all are a bunch of liars. I know. You know, it's like the one thing we have in common. This is an ode to my butthole.
Also opinions.
Opinions?
Yeah. Everybody has those.
And a recent scientific report says those come from the anus. It's like serotonin is in the stomach. All right, this is a butthole. Oh, you. Oh, putrid rose. Oh, floral gift from some dead god I buried alive only to excavate and find still fresh. Oh, myriad sweet sounds I make with it. Trumpet, trombone, tornado, goblin. Oh, mouth that gapes and swallows. Oh, mouth that hungers for new tongue. Oh, stomach that rests so far from the colon but still calls him cousin. Oh, come, oh, old world magic. Oh, small hungry prince. How many octaves can you tuba? How many eloquent speeches come right from the gut? What countless phallic shapes have you named husband? What knuckle tucked in you like a dike holds all this stale water, sweet you, who birthed iron when I took too many women's multivitamins, claiming there is no such thing as gender, praise. How you expand and shrink like a house's water pipes from winter into heat, praise. How when you bleed, you are always trying to tell me something. Praise you, tiny gymnast. Beast with a breathing halo. Gold band that weds this strange body to this strange, strange earth. Thank you.
Sam Sachs, everyone. All right, well, I promised you a great reading, and that worked out. Now I promised you a raffle prize, and it probably won't work out. So let's see. Oh, you know what though? I was sitting back there, and Sam's butthole poem reminded me that I left out a a raffle prize, which is my extra copy of a 2002 United States Mint proof set of all the coins. I don't know why your poem reminded me of that, but it did, and I don't know why I had an extra copy, but I do. So you can have it, maybe, if you're lucky. All right, so let's see. So you got your numbers out?
We get to pick the prize.
Yeah, you can pick whatever you'd like. That I presented. Don't take this, or my hat, please. So let's see. 7. All right.
There's so many to choose from.
Yeah, there you go. Also, I bought a second one of those that will be available next month. And you guys can drink coffee together or something. So yeah, that's the better one though. The other one has a chip in it. All right. So our next reader is Deb Olin Unferth, and she's a new associate professor in the English department here at the University of Texas. So let's welcome her in a sec. But before that, she was the head contractor for the world's biggest swimming pool in San Alfonso del Mar, Chile. Aside from constructing the 1 kilometer long swimming pool, she has created the collection of stories Minor Robbery and the novel Vacation, both published by McSweeney's and available back there. And she's also written the memoir Revolution, which was published by Henry Holt, and it was a finalist for the 2012 National Book Critics Circle Award. Is that right? Is that the right word? I don't know. Well, anyway, with the pool up and running as one of Chile's new booming tourist attractions, she is now here to read for us. Let's welcome Deb Olin Unferth.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here. So actually, I don't even really know how to swim. Anyway, so this is an excerpt from a longer piece that I'm going to read. I didn't realize I was going to be reading with 3 poets, which is very unfair because you guys have these little pieces that you could just read, several complete pieces. But actually, it's much worse to read with a performance artist. Have you guys ever read with a performance artist? Because they're so cool, and everyone wants to just keep watching them. And there you are with your little piece. So anyway, this particular piece it's just an excerpt from a story about an adjunct, which is a very sad person in academia. I don't know if you guys know adjuncts. So it takes me, I think, about 12 or 13 minutes to read. There was a time I lived alone in the crappiest neighborhood I would ever live in, and had few friends, and worked at a place where the people I saw were all quietly abandoning their plans like I was. I had the faces of dying people all around me. One day, the office assistant called me over to her desk and said she was an Indian dancer, and how would I like to go to an Indian dance? This same office assistant had once said to me, "You know what I think every time I look at you? Guess what I think." "Here Comes the Bride," I said. "Wrong," she said. "I think about that movie where the angel comes to earth and shows a man the future and how bad it's going to be, and the man looks at the future and says, 'But what about Mary? What happens to her?' And the angel says, 'You're not going to like it, George.' And George says, 'Well, I have to know. Tell me, angel.' And the angel says, 'She's an old maid. She works at the library.' And the man says, 'No!' 'I don't know that movie,' I said. 'You should put that on your voicemail. She's an old maid. She works at the library.' 'I don't work at the library.' People would know they had the right number. After that, she called me Mary and soon had them all calling me Mary. So this assistant was a lot of things, but she certainly was not Indian. And on the day she asked me to the dance, I said so. What kind of an Indian are you supposed to be? I said. Then it turned out she meant Native American, not Indian, but she wasn't that either. You have the cheeks of a cowgirl, I said. You have the face of a cowboy. It was pretty. It was true. She was both pretty and masculine. Well, she had learned how to dance some Native American dances, and her own mother had sewed her a Native American costume. It was beautiful, the costume, she said, and if you drove out of the city, you could find the land the Native Americans once lived on and still do today, and where they dance still. She had a flyer about it. Look. I never heard of this place, I said. Do you want to come or not? I don't know how to dance any Native American dances. They'll teach you. Everyone will. It's very nice out there. I didn't know why she wanted me along. Maybe she wanted more friends, which might not be so bad considering the way things were going just then. Okay, I said, I'll go. Great, she said. Her eyebrows went up. You'll drive? At this job, 4 times a day, 30 people assembled before me, and it was my duty to tell them some useful fact about the English language, a fact they could then take and go out into the world with and use to better their positions in society. There were no grades in the class. It was a pass-fail class, and whether they got a pass or a fail depended on an essay they had to write on the last day, which was read and evaluated by outside sources. These outside sources were supposed to be mysterious, or maybe not even people, or maybe just God, but I happened to know were simply whichever teacher or two the office assistant lined up to do it. It was a probationary class intended for the students so illiterate that it was almost unseemly to have them there. It was the last chance class. It went by the number 99. Anyone who passed got to enter college for real, sign up for 101. Anyone who failed had to leave. The students from 99 were all over the hallways. They didn't care about any useful facts to take out into the world. They cared only about the essay graded by outside sources. 30% failed most years, and everybody knew this. The students in 99 disliked me with a courage and a vigor that was kind of amazing. I stood at the front of the room on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays and said, "The test is graded by outside sources." I used this to respond to every complaint, defense, and plea. The test is graded by outside sources. The test is graded by outside sources. The test is graded by outside sources. That day, after I agreed to bring the assistant to the dance, I went and stood in front of my 3rd class of the day. It was nearly the end of the semester, and they had that unstrung look to them, gaunt, spooked, blaming. Let me remind you, I told them, I don't grade the tests, and I can tell you this much, any essay without a proper introduction will not get a pass, so let's turn our attention back to the board. I was what is called an adjunct, a thing attached to another thing in a dependent or subordinate position. The assistant had it a little wrong about the movie, by the way. It wasn't the future that George got to see. The angel's job is to show George what the world would be like if George had never existed. The premise of the movie, because of course I'd seen it, everyone's seen it, is that George is unhappy and has been for many years, his whole life nearly, and he is so full of fear and regret that he wants to die, or even better, to not have been born in the first place. So the angel shows George what the world would be like if George had never existed. It turns out that without George, the world would be a cold, dark place. Without George, people would be poor and lonely. Some people would be dead because he hadn't been there to save them. Others would be older than they would be if he had lived. Without George, a dark force would be in control, and the population would be suppressed and subdued by it. People would walk bundled against the fierce winds to their coal stoves to eat their bland Christmas dinners alone. By accident, I heard him play. Wait a minute. I'm sorry, you guys. I printed out and I deleted a spot. Hang on a second. I am so embarrassed, you guys.
Just freestyle.
I left out a page. Oh my God, I can't believe it, you guys. I left out a page.
You're a poet. They do that all the time.
All right. continue. It might be a little shorter than 13 minutes. Did I mention that this rundown school, this flat barrel-bottom place, was run between the walls of a building designed by a very famous architect? Yes, it was. It had been the high point of the architect's career. It was while making this building that the architect had come up with his very best ideas about designing buildings, and had summed these ideas up in a short, catchy sentence that he said aloud, and that was later written into books that were read all over the world and was now familiar even to the layperson. After saying this catchy sentence, the architect succumbed to his drinking problem and never straightened himself out, and eventually died bankrupt and alone. But this building still stood, and now somehow these people had gotten their hands on the place and were ruining it as fast as they could. Water damage, broken tiles, missing doorknobs, and worst of all, modern rehab. Linoleum floors, dropped ceilings, paint over wood. Catastrophe was setting in, but this one room had been preserved, perhaps because the public still encountered it on festive holiday occasions. The architect's one mistake had been to put this room on the 7th floor. The public had to be ushered in past the wreckage to reach it, up the new fake wood paneled elevators, over the colorless hallway carpet that had been nailed down there. But once inside, an auditorium opened up overhead, and it was perfect. It marked that thin line of one artistic movement shifting into another, one great artist at his best. So now the question is, so I'm just going to tell you what the page said. What happened was, the narrator got a student in her class who was so terrible. I can't believe this happened, you guys. I'm so sorry. That he was so terrible that there was no way that he was going to pass the class. And she doesn't really care because she has to teach so many classes, right? But it turns out that he's a visa student, which means if at the end of the semester, if he doesn't pass the class, he has to go back to his country. So anyway, all right. So anyway, she is walking down the hallway one day, and she hears sounds coming from inside this beautiful auditorium that I was just describing. So, by accident, I heard him play. I was walking down the hallway toward another tedious day, and a strange sound stopped me. Strands of violin and piano were coming from behind a door. I looked in. On the stage, the kid from my class was on the piano. Another student was playing the violin. The kid kept lifting one hand, keeping the left hand going and conducting the violin with his melody hand. Then the violin stopped and the kid continued to play, and the sound I was hearing was formal and sad and peculiar. The piece had a density and a mathematical oddness and originality. He stopped playing and looked up. I ducked out the door. I stood in the hallway thinking, how had such a talented kid wound up in our school? The school was no great music school. There were better music schools up the street, not to mention all over the country and the world. I felt like I couldn't breathe for a moment, like my lungs were being pressed. I saw the emotional deadness in me, and I saw it lift. It was temporarily gone. Another paper of his landed in the pile. I couldn't understand any of it. Something about cars, the color of cars, maybe about the color of cars, something about the advent of America, of bank machines and microwave sandwiches. That afternoon, he sat at the back of the class, wrote down whatever was going up on the board. I told him to talk to me at the end of the hour. He came and stood in front of me, his plastic bags in his hands at his sides. He was the same height as me, and he had sharp, dark, good looks, though his nervousness shaded them. Yes, miss, he said. Why don't you explain to me what you're trying to say here, I said. I had his paper in my hand, and he lifted his eyebrows over it. Is it not right, he said. I dropped the paper on the desk. This writing is horrendous, I said. What are you doing at this school? Didn't you apply anywhere else? Proper music schools? He said nothing. Well, I said, well,